Hi, Zach Reiser here, and welcome back to another effects pedal demo. Today we are going to be doing the deep dive into the LVX from Meris. Now, if you're looking for a video with lots of examples of presets and kind of my overall impressions, I have already done that video. It's on my channel. I highly recommend you look at that video first just to get an overview of the LVX. But today is going to be about looking under the hood and really seeing how much this thing brings to the table. Now, I'm going to do my best to get through as much as I possibly can in this one video, but this thing has way too much for me to cover every possible detail. I have the manual sitting next to me just so I don't forget anything. And then also, I do want to mention that I was one of the few beta testers on this pedal, so what you see here is very likely going to be very similar to what you're going to get when you get this pedal in the mail, but there might be some small firmware updates from now until when this thing really hits the shelves. So let's not waste any time. The first thing we are going to do, at least in my opinion, is drive into the globals menu, and we are going to turn on text-based view. I much prefer the text-based editing view rather than the kind of bubble view for doing deep dive editing, just because you can see a lot more parameters at the same time. So let's slide over a few pages here to delay page 1, and we have kind of the overall things you're going to see for all the delay types and all the delay structures. First thing I want to do very quickly is just show off the 3 delay algorithms. So they're going to give you digital delay, a very clean, pristine delay, a BBD style, like analog type delay, which has a little bit of high-end roll-off as the repeats go away and a little bit of saturation. And then also the magnetic delay, which is going to be kind of Meris's emulation of tape delays or Benson-style delays, gives you that kind of tape warble. Now, one thing I do want to mention about the mod knob, which is your modulation knob, this is kind of a global modulation parameter per delay type. You can get much more in-depth with your own modulation on this thing by digging into the built-in LFOs and the built-in effects like chorusing, flanging, phasing, etc. But this one is kind of a one-and-done modulation if you just want some quick color to your delay. So I'm going to turn up the mix just a little bit so we can hear the repeats. Modulation is at 0, and I'm going to cycle through all 3 types of delay and then go back with about 40% modulation so you can hear some of that baked in mod. Going back to the digital delay, now I'm going to turn up the modulation to, I don't know, let's do about 40% and see what that sounds like. So hopefully that gives you a good idea of the different delay types and what they bring. But in my personal opinion, I don't really feel like this delay pedal is trying to emulate any particular delay type. So it's nice to have these color options available, but for me, it really goes back to the kind of slogan of this pedal of being a modular delay system. So the sound design approach of building like novel delay sounds is going to be really where the fun comes in. And I feel like what's more important than the delay type on the LVX is actually the delay structure, which we're going to talk about in a second. So I've gone back to the digital delay with basically zero modulation. I'm going to leave it on this for pretty much the rest of the video because I feel like this is going to give you the most like even or cleanest response so you can really hear what all the little things that we add along the way are doing to the signal. So the next kind of global parameter that we have here available on all delay types and structures is subdivisions. And we can pick a subdivision for the left and the right side. So for instance, I could do something like a dotted eighth in the left and a quarter note in the right. Let's hear what that sounds like. Now, to really get an idea of what's happening here, I suggest headphones or good stereo monitors because I'm running this in stereo, and you can really hear one delay is on the left and one delay is on the right. But if we go to delay page 2, we have this lovely crossfeed control, which essentially allows us to take two parallel delays and start feeding one delay into the other. So now let's hear what it sounds like if we run 50% of one delay into the other. And for fun, 100% crossfeed. So one quick note I want to say before I go on any further, it's just about how the pedal kind of functions when you're in edit mode versus preset mode. When you are in text edit mode, the knobs in these 6 knobs right here are the 6 parameters you see kind of around the screen. So the top parameters right here correspond to these 2 big knobs. These guys right here correspond to these, and the ones on the bottom correspond to the 2 encoders. If we go to preset mode, though, they are exactly what they say they are. So this is your time, your mix, your feedback, your modulation. Now, these 2 encoders, though, per preset can be set to whatever parameter you want them to adjust. So you can pick a parameter that you always want to be able to adjust on the fly. So we're going to go back to kind of our basic sound here. No crossfeed. We're going to do no modulation. And then we're also going to turn off our subdivisions so that we're back on just a straight delay. And the reason why is that we are now going to get to structure, which drastically changes the way that the delay character is, much more so than the delay type. So this entire time so far, I have been in standard structure mode, which is very standard, as the name would imply. It's just 2 delay lines with their own subdivisions. That's all that's really happening here. When we go to the next mode, though, multi-tap, this is when things get pretty crazy. We have up to 8 taps that we can move around the stereo field however we choose. So if I just click over into multi-tap, let's hear what that sounds like with nothing else affected. Now, of course, all the other parameters are still there to change on top of this structure. So we could change the delay type to like a BEAD if we wanted to. We can change our subdivisions however we would like to on top of the multi-tap aspect. So for instance, this is dotted eighth and triplet half note. One thing to notice, when I switched the structure to multi-tap from standard, you go from 2 pages in the delay section to 9. And that's because Meris gives you individual control of every single tap's pan, and level. So we can make certain taps louder or in different parts of the stereo image. And this is what's giving you that lovely kind of circular stereo image right now, is that every tap is slowly moving from left to right. And you can see that by the pan amount there. Now, I'm not going to go in and edit these things right now because it's just going to take way too much time, but be aware you can get really, really specific with where you put each tap in regards to the level and the stereo field. I've turned the subdivisions back to nothing or off, and now let's go from multi-tap to multi-filter. Now this is a very cool delay type. It's a multi-tap, but each tap has its own filter control. So you're going to hear kind of that stereo image happening here, but also each tap is a different timbral character. So now when you look at the delay page, instead of 9 pages in multi-tap, we actually have 10 pages, because now we have the ability to adjust not just level and pan, but also the filter and the cue. So the resonance of each filter on every single tap, which is pretty crazy. So yet again, you can get really, really specific with the sound design here, dialing every single tap's panning, level, and essentially timbre. Pretty wild. So moving on from multi-filter, we get to poly. And in Meris's words, this is a dual version of the polymoon, and it's kind of each side is getting individually processed by its own polymoon algorithm and then getting spread all over the stereo field. I particularly love this structure. So in poly, we have some new parameters to deal with. We now can control the modulation amount of the left and the right side of this dual polymoon, and they give you some pretty diverse sets of modulation. You can have simple things like slow and shallow, for instance. So let me get them both set on the same amount, slow and shallow. And now let's hear what that sounds like. Kind of this cool phasing, flanging vibe. But then we can go really pretty crazy. So we could do medium and wide, which is still on the more subtle side, I would say. But let's hear what that sounds like. Pretty cool. And then we can go really way out there. So we can actually get into like frequency modulation range. So we're doing like, this is at 96 hertz. Let's maybe on the left side, let's do something even crazier. You can even do some pitch shifting. So let's do like how about a 5th down and a 4th up. Lastly, for structure, simple one here, a reverse delay. Just a classic reverse delay. Now, all of our other global parameters still apply, so we could change the subdivisions, we could change the crossfeed amount here, but it's on a reverse delay. Just a nice, cool texture. So moving on from delay to the next block, which is dynamics. Now the dynamics, as the name would imply, is going to give you things that allow you to control your volume over time. Now the very cool thing about the LVX, with everything it brings that isn't a delay, is that you can apply them anywhere in the digital signal chain. So this includes the filters, the modulations like choruses and flangers, and also the dynamics and the drives. And what I mean by that is if we go to the first delay type, the first dynamics type, which is compressor, we have this location control here. And this is essentially on almost everything else in the pedal. And this allows us to put the compressor, in this case, on before it hits the delay. We can put it with the dry signal, so it actually will compress my dry signal, which is very cool because it allows us to use the LVX as essentially a multi-effect, because we can take any of these extra things and apply them just to our dry signal. And then we also can put it on the feedback loop, so actually in the delay line itself, which be very careful when you're doing that because it is a feedback loop, so it will sometimes run away and get very loud very fast. Or we can put it on post, so after the delay. And I actually want to switch from compression really quickly to show this off with the next one, which is swell, because I think it's easier to hear what I'm talking about with swell. Swell is a very simple concept. We are just swelling the signal, so you're not hearing the transient or the attack. Now, here is what's really cool, though. If we put this on pre plus dry, that means my dry signal is being swelled into the delay, and it will sound like this. Gorgeous, lovely swell delays here. But let's move it from pre plus dry to just pre. And now what's happening is my dry signal is not being affected by the swell engine, but it is still swelling into the delay. So notice how the delays almost sound reversed. That's because the transient is gone. So imagine the swelled sound you just heard a second ago, but it's kind of being run into the delay, and you're still just hearing my dry signal. The first dynamic engine is actually the compressor. It's a really solid compressor. It gives you all of the controls you would normally want and need for a compressor, so we can control the attack and release, we can control the makeup gain, the threshold, the ratio, and yet again, you can put this anywhere in the chain. And also, if you turn off the delay by turning the mix down to 0, then you essentially get these effects just as standalone effects. So we can go to pre plus dry, but there's no delay line, so it's just dry, and now I have no compression and compression on my dry signal. And now here's where we can really hear the effect of it in the feedback loop versus not. And I'm not going to leave it on for very long because it will start to feedback. But let's go from pre plus dry to just pre. So now we're having my dry bass is not compressed, but the going into the delay is my compressed dry signal. Sorry, got to turn the mix back up to hear the delay line. Now here's the scary part. We put it on the feedback loop, and you can imagine if you compress a feedback loop, it's going to bring down the volume of those highs, making the quiet things appear louder, and it's going to feedback much more aggressively. And hopefully you can hear it. It's a really cool effect because it's still repeating, but it's not decaying, but you're getting more compressor pumping. That alone is a sound I've never heard before. So we have compression, we have swell, and then we also have diffusion, one of my favorite dynamic engines. Essentially, this is like a smearing effect. So it's going to be kind of how sharp is the attack on each repeat. So we can do kind of the classic diffuse delay sound. So without diffusion, it sounds like this. And now with diffusion. So you get more of kind of a granular style delay. And yet again, this is on pre, but I can do pre plus dry, and now my dry signal is kind of smeared a little bit. I personally love this effect. And really quickly, I want to show what diffusion does to a multi-tap delay because I think it's super powerful. It almost gets you into kind of reverb territory. So if I go to a multi-tap delay and I go back to the dynamic engine here and I turn off diffusion, this is that multi-tap again without diffusion. And now let's turn diffusion on, and we'll take it off my dry signal. And you can hear it's almost like a reverb because in reality, reverb is basically just a bunch of delays smeared together. And the last dynamic type is a limiter. So very similar to a compressor, except we're going to basically just get a hard wall that we can't go above. So I'm not going to dive into sound examples of this, but it is there if you would like it. So moving on from dynamics, we now have preamps. Now, preamps can be anything from a slight tonal coloration to full-on drive. And I'm not going to have time to go through every single preamp model, but I do want to kind of give you a demonstration, at least, of what's in here. Now, the first preamp option is basically a totally clean preamp or no coloration at all. It is just a volume pedal, and this is going to allow you to do things like volume swells with an expression pedal. I'm not going to show that here now, but we'll show how to kind of route things like LFO and expression to these items. You also could do tremolo effects with the volume pedal, and I will show that now, and that's going to be by using an LFO. So if I turn the volume pedal on, the volume pedal preamp on, and I have it on pre plus dry, you're not going to hear anything because as far as the LVX is concerned, nothing is controlling this volume pedal. So this is really where you go back to that word modular again. So you have to kind of show what we want to control the volume. So if we go over to the modifiers section, this now allows me to route the LFO, or a low-frequency oscillator, moving at slow speed, aka a tremolo for volume, to that volume. So I'm going to turn up the speed a little bit just so we can hear it more clearly. So we'll do like, 3 cycles per second. And then I'm going to change the assignment of where this LFO is assigned to. So now I have it assigned to the level of our preamp section, and now we get this lovely tremolo sound. And just to be clear, the LFO is what's controlling that volume. So you need to go to the modifier section or also the expression pedal section, which is the next section here. So if I had an expression pedal plugged in, I have I have 6 assignments that I can do with the expression pedal to put them anywhere in my particular preset. So same idea here, I would just assign the expression pedal to that pre-level control. So moving on from the simple volume pedal, let's go to the actual first real preamp, which is a tube style preamp. So it's going to give you some of that like subtle saturation. Now right now I have it on pre plus dry, so it's going to be affecting my bass as well as going into the delay. But yet again, we don't have to have it affect the dry signal. We can have it just affect what's going into the delay, or more fun, in my opinion, is putting it on the feedback loop. Or putting it after the entire delay line. Essentially, the louder I play or the more notes I play will cause more drive because it's more signal going in to this preamp. You get the idea. So moving on from the tube, we have a bunch of other drives here. We have a transistor style drive. We have an op-amp style drive. These are kind of different levels of overdrive, so to speak. We also have a actual drive, which is a little bit more involved. It gives you some more coloration. We have a treble and a bass control. If you want kind of more traditional distortion, this is where to go. Now I've turned the bass all the way up because obviously. And then let's see what this kind of drive sounds like. And actually, just for the hell of it, let's turn off the delay for a second. So let's just hear the drive on my bass. So not a bad little drive for free there if you don't happen to have a drive pedal on your board. But let's bring the delay back in, and let's take this off of my dry signal. So now I'm just running my distorted signal into the delay, but my dry is still clean. To get the balance right, let's lower the level of the preamp. So moving on from the drive, we're going to go to the last preamp, which is the Bit Crusher. And I am so happy that Meris put this in here. Anybody that knows Meris knows they know Bit Crushers. And this is the Bit Crusher from the Autobit, and it sounds just as delectably kind of destructive. So this has all the controls you would want. You have bit depth, sample rate. You can get anything from really crunchy bit crush style effects to kind of that nice little subtle kind of chiminess on the top with some sample rate reduction. Here's kind of that chiminess, and it's on my dry signal, by the way. Let's lower the bit depth. Let's hear this just on the delay. How about in the feedback loop? Let's turn the bit depth up a little bit. Oh, that's great. And now post. Moving on from the preamps, we are going to move into the filters. And anybody, yet again, who's played with an Autobit from Meris knows that Meris knows how to make very juicy sounding filter emulations. So the first filter type we have here is a ladder filter, modeled off of, I'm assuming, a Moog ladder filter. And we have all of the kind of parameters we would want to have in a filter. We can choose the type of filter, so low pass, let's see what we have here. We have low pass, band pass, and high pass, which is lovely. We also can adjust the stereo spread of the filters and the resonance of the filter, and I'm going to go ahead and turn that resonance up right now. And then, of course, we have the filter cutoff frequency. Now, you're going to notice that right now, if I play this, the filter is static, so it's not moving. It's just going to be lowering the top end, so my delay is going to be a little bit less trebly. And I can adjust that more and make it really dark if I want. Or I can open this sucker up all the way if I want to. You get the idea. But if you want this filter to move, yet again, like the volume pedal, you need to attach something to it or assign something to it, whether that's an expression pedal with your foot or the envelope signal of your instrument or an LFO. So let's move over to the modifiers section here where we have our LFO again that we saw earlier, and now we are going to assign the LFO to the filter frequency or cutoff. And now we can hear we have that lovely moving filter sound. Now, of course, when we go back to our filter here, we can put that on our dry signal as well. Or anywhere else in the chain, as we have seen many times. Now, while I'm here, I will show off some of the other filter types, and then I'll talk about how we can modulate the filter in some more interesting ways than just a simple LFO. So I am going to take it off my dry signal, because I think it's more fun to hear just on the delay line, and we're going to first just show off we're in low pass mode. Now let's go to band pass. So now instead of hearing things below the cutoff, we're going to hear things in the middle of a particular range of frequencies. Bandpass filters tend to always sound kind of wah-ish in a way, and then we can go to high pass, so it's going to be rolling off low end instead of high end. Turning the resonance down a little bit. Let's go back to low pass for a second, turn the resonance back up. So the other filter types we have available here, we have a ladder filter, we have a state variable filter, and a comb filter. So let's hear the difference between the state variable and the ladder filter. Here is the state variable in low pass mode with the settings as shown. Really a very liquid sounding filter. So now moving from state variable to the last filter type, which is a comb filter. I'm sorry, I'm going kind of fast, I know, but we got a lot of stuff to get through. Comb filtering is going to give you those kind of metallic sounding filter vibes. So here's settings as shown. When you turn the depth up on this thing, it gets crazy really fast. So here's at short or small depth. Now this sounds really wonky because our LFO is going kind of fast. So let's go back to our modifier section here and turn our LFO speed way down. And let's hear what that sounds like now on our filter. So the filters, I think, are like the best location in the pedal to really show off what the modifiers are really capable of, because it's such an obvious sound. But of course, you can apply these to anything. You could control drive amount, compressor amount, delay times, etc. with any of these modifiers. But so far on the filter, we have been listening to just a simple kind of triangle up and down LFO. And actually, to make this even more apparent, I'm going to turn off the delay. So all you're hearing is my dry signal with the filter. And now let's go over to our modifier and let's change our wave shape. So instead of being triangle, we could do something like a square wave. Hopefully you hear it's a sharper contrast there. And then we have things like these cool little stepping patterns where we have like steps upward or steps downward, and then we also have ramp up and ramp down. So here's a little bit of ramp down, for instance. Now, I don't have time in this video to do what I normally like to do, which is combining things with tons of other effects on my very large pedal board over here, but I do want to show off how juicy this filter really is. It's just a super solid sounding filter. So to do that, I'm going to turn off this effect for a minute and turn on a little bit of a kind of synth-based sound. So this is my Boss OC2 Octaver Pure Wet into my BEAD fuzz pedal, and it sounds like this. And now let's run that into just this filter, which is, there's no delay here. It's just a filter on that sound. And let's go ahead and, just for fun while we're here, let's slow that rate down, go back to our filter, take it off of my actually, we'll leave it on the dry signal, but we're going to pull the delay back in here. And let's hear what that sounds like. So I'm going to keep it on this ladder filter for the moment, but I want to show off how we can control this with things other than LFOs. So if we go back, right now we're still on that nice kind of wobbly LFO. If we go back to our modifier section, we can turn off the LFO. So now there's nothing modulating the filter, but we can go to a different modifier. So we have two LFOs, so you could actually modulate the filter in two ways at the same time if you wanted, but you also can do something like an envelope. So right now, I can take this envelope assign and put it to the filter frequency yet again. And now, instead of controlling the cutoff with an LFO, I'm controlling it with my fingers and how hard I pluck. Now, if you don't want it to start so low on the filter, then we can change the minimum amount. So rather than being at 0, we could have it start like 25 or 20% through at the bottom of the cutoff. Now, it doesn't stop here because you don't have to have one or the other. So right now I'm controlling the filter with the attack of my note, but I also can go back to the LFO and control the same thing, the filter frequency, with the LFO. So now it's going to be wobbling, but get lower in frequency as my note decays. And to really hear this in effect, let's put that synth bass effect, Boss OC2 into BEAD Fuzz back on. So we got a lot more than a delay on our hands here. And just because we are using a delay pedal, let's throw the delay back into the mix. So while I'm here, I just want to really quickly finish out talking about the modifiers, because so far we have shown only 2 of the options. Now, yet again, not in the modifier section, but if you want to control something with an expression pedal, it's right next to it in the expression pedal assigns. There are 6 slots, so you can control 6 things simultaneously in whatever way you would like with an expression pedal. But alongside of that, we have all the modifiers. We've talked about LFO 1 and 2, or LFO A and B. There's also the envelope control, controlling things with our instrument's volume. But then we have a sample and hold control here. So a sample and hold is essentially a random amount, a random kind of value at any given point in time. We can do the classic sample and hold stuff where we control the speed of it and then what we're assigning it to. Not going to go through all these right now. I just want to show you that they're here. And then this is a big one that I unfortunately just don't have time to really dive into. We have a full 16-step sequencer. 16 steps. Now, it's meticulous. It's going to take you some time to dial this thing in, but you can go through on every single step of the sequence and dial in the amount that you want for that particular step and then assign it to anything. So you could control the filter cutoff in a 16-step repeated fashion, and you're going to see in a minute there's an entire pitch shifting element to this pedal. So in theory, you could attach the sequencer to pitch particular pitches on 16 different steps and build a full kind of pitched sequence over time. I hope by now you're starting to fully understand how insanely dense this pedal is. So we have drives, we have filters, we have delay types, we have delay structures, and now moving along, we're going to just, why not, for the hell of it, let's throw in some pitch shifting in there as well. So we have quite a few different pitch shifting options, and at this point in the video, I just don't have time to dive into everything, but I want to just give you little flavors here and there. We have what they call polychroma, which is essentially going to be like a polyphonic chromatic pitch shifter. So we could do something anywhere in the entire octave range. We could add that on top of our signal. So for instance, here is a 5th up from my signal, and this is applied in the pre position, so not on my dry signal, but leading into the delays. So you can hear we get that nice little 5th sound on the delay. It's kind of weird if we play multiple notes. We can, of course, apply that in the feedback loop. So now it's going to have that kind of cascading pitch effect where it's going to go out of control really quickly. Very cool sound, though. Actually, very cool sound. Let's try that with an octave just for the fun. And now if you're wondering if it's got a shimmer delay in there, since everybody loves a good shimmer delay, we can go in here and throw it into reverse mode. We're now in octave up in the feedback section, and now we have a shimmer delay. Actually, that's really pretty. Just for while we're here, let's switch it to multi-tap. So going back to the pitch shifting section here, I will say that these can be put on your dry signal and they are a cool effect, but you're not going to replace like a POG 2 from EHX or something, or a Digitech Whammy with these particular pitch shifting algorithms. They're a different sound, a different timbre. They're really designed more, in my opinion, for like a sound design approach on the delay line, but we can put it on our dry signal, and yet again we can turn the delay off, and now we have an octave up on the dry. And this pitch shifting mode is called polychroma because it is polyphonic chromatic, so we can play a chord, and it does track it very well. Moving on from polychroma, we have probably my favorite, which is stolen from the Hydra, and this is a harmonized pitch shifter. So we actually can pick 2 diatonic harmonies to go in a scale that will move with the scale as you play it. So for instance, let's put on a third and a major seventh, or a third and a seventh, and hear what that sounds like. I don't have time to go into the other pitch sections, but I want to just show you what they are. We have a microtune, which is going to be kind of like a chorusing style detuning pitched effect. So I'll just play a chord real quick. Very nice, just lush stereo chorusing here. Of course, you can just use the built-in choruses if you would like, but if you want to fine-tune the detunage of your microtune, it is here for you. So then we have monochroma. This is very similar to the polychroma, except you have 2 pitch shifting options, one for the left and one for the right, but this is intended to be monophonic. So it's kind of similar to the harmonized setting, except it's not harmonized. It's just going to be a static interval the entire time. So let's hear what that sounds like. Let's do down a fifth and up a fifth. And again, in the feedback loop. That's a cool sound, especially on harmonics. If you have headphones on, try to listen to the difference of the cascading pitch that's happening on both sides of your head. It's a very cool sound. And then the last pitch shifting type is what they call lo-fi, and this is essentially like an intentionally crappy pitch shifting algorithm. So it gives you all those, like, if you ever had an old Digitech Whammy, for instance, like the ones from the 90s, it has that kind of like just nasty sounding pitch shifting. Now, modulate is not to be confused with modify. So if we go over to the modifiers section, this is the LFOs, the envelopes, the things that you can control other things with. Modulate is the modulation effects. So it's your choruses, your flangers, etc. Not going to go into a ton of depth on all these, but they all sound really solid. So here is a chorus, kind of a nice, just thick, lush chorus. I know I've said this 1,000 times, but turn your delay signal off, put it on pre plus dry, and now you have a chorus pedal. A stereo chorus pedal, by the way. Pulling that delay line back in, let's move on from chorus to the flanger. Of course, all these classic style modulation effects have all the controls you would normally associate with them. So in the case of a flanger, we have things like speed, depth, and feedback. I just don't have time to go into all these little details, but they are all there if you want to tweak. This is one of my favorite ones. It's a dynamic flanger, so this is kind of like has a built-in envelope follower, essentially. So the harder I pluck, the more it moves, so to speak, and you can choose things like the direction, and then also we have kind of our normal other flanger controls in there. So do you hear that like downward zipper effect when I pluck hard? For fun, let's throw that synth bass Boss OC2 bead fuzz into that. Moving on from the dynamic flanger, we get the lovely cassette emulation. So you essentially have a little lo-fi emulation in a box here. We have lots of controls like the crinkle amount of the tape, the static, also the low and high EQ of the tape. Let's hear what that sounds like with these settings. With my dry signal in there, you get that full lo-fi effect, but if you want a nice clean and pristine dry signal but running into a lo-fi machine, you have that too. Moving on from cassette, we get to a barber pole phaser, because why not? Nice. And then moving on from barber pole, we have a granulize. So it's such a little granular effect block inside here, granular synthesis or granular ideas being chopping things up into small little amounts to make new sounds. So let's hear what it sounds like just right when I turn it on with my dry bass. Nice and glitchy. Let's take it off of the dry signal and let's put it actually in the feedback loop. While we're here, let's go back to delay. Let's put it on poly. Why not? And let's hear what it sounds like with that. Somewhere. We're getting patty now. Let's go to dynamics and let's put on diffusion and let's put it on everything, my dry signal as well. And actually we're going to go back to the modulation section and put this on my dry signal as well. Moving on from granulize, I can never say that word. Moving on from granulize, we get to the last one, which is a ring modulator. Now, earlier we were showing tremolo with a volume pedal. You also can do tremolo with a ring modulator at low rates. So I'll show a little bit of that here. Nobody really cares videos about tremolo with ring modulation. That's not true. Ring modulation makes great tremolos. But let's move on to what it's really known for, which is wacky and crazy noises by cranking up the rate. So hopefully you're starting to see how to combine things to make more interesting sounding delays than your standard delays. So with this ring mod, let's go back to our modifier, the LFO. We're going to grab a really slow LFO and we're going to change the frequency of the ring modulator now. So we are reaching the end of the road of this very long video. If you've stuck around the whole time, thank you so much. But now we're going to move on to the last couple sections of the settings or the edit pages. We have the mix section here. This is just a couple simple utilities for kind of the mixer or the levels of your dry signal into the system. And then we have the looper section. Now I haven't talked about the looper, and unfortunately I don't have enough time to give like deep demonstrations of the looper, but it is a super solid 60-second stereo looper, and it can be placed anywhere in the path, which is very cool. So we can put it yet again before the delay, after the delay, or even in the feedback loop, which is pretty wild and interesting. And then we also have two looper effects right here that you can apply in real time, and you can select what effect you want these two foot switches to do when you are in looper mode. And then finally, we are moving all the way through. We've talked about the modifiers, I've talked about the expression pedal settings, and then we get to the global settings. And this is where you set things that you would imagine, like if you want trails or spillover, if you want it to display BPM versus milliseconds, if you want it to be in the bubble view or the text view, you get the idea. So I hope you enjoyed this kind of detailed dive into the LVX, and the one takeaway I hope you have, if nothing else, is that this thing goes crazy deep. If you want to dive into really novel sound design textures, of course delays, but as you've seen, all kinds of stuff outside of the realm of delay, this thing can take you there. You just have to be willing to dig in and put the time into it. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, share it, all of that good stuff. It really helps me and this channel out. And of course, I'll be back with more effects demos, gear demos, and other performance videos. Thank you so much for watching.